And we're back with another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast. Feels like it's been a while since we last recorded. Lots happened since then. We've had some good games this week. Most notably, the ones we talked about on Sunday between Marquette and Purdue. Gonzaga and San Diego State was on Monday. Then we had Bama, Illinois last night. And then tonight, the game we're going to start it off with, we had Baylor and St. John's, which as of right now would probably go down as the game of the year. Jeremy Roach hitting the game-winning three after St. John's missed two free throws with 4.1 seconds left to ice the game up by two. Missed them both. Baylor goes the length of the court. Jeremy Roach hits a game-winning three-pointer to win 99-98 in double overtime. Felt like both these teams had a chance to close the game at different points. St. John's in regulation, Baylor in the first overtime. And then it certainly felt like St. John's was going to walk away with it in double overtime. I mean, effectively, Baylor was 2 for 8 from the foul line down the stretch in double overtime, right? They missed both. O'Meara missed both. They missed the front end of a 1-and-1. So to me, I look at that as like an 0 for 2. And then they were 1 for 2 two other times. So 2 for 8 down the stretch. Really felt like St. John's was gonna run away with this one. But no, Baylor hung tough, hit a big shot, and now they're waiting for the winner of Tennessee and Virginia for tomorrow night's championship game down in the Bahamas.
Yeah, I mean, this game was absolutely insane. Baylor ended up coming out with the win somehow. I thought when they got down early, I didn't think there was really much of a chance of them being able to make a run and come back, but credit them for being feisty on the offensive glass. I think they finished with 15 or 16 offensive rebounds to St. John's 7. So, and Norchad O'Meara was pretty great on the glass. And there was, even when St. John's would grab a rebound, like in the second half, like late in this game, Baylor was able to just wait on them and kind of rip the ball out of their hands, like go in there with two hands and grab it and force a turnover and gain a possession back. So they probably had more offensive rebounds than the numbers actually say and gained extra possessions in that way. So that was really key in them making a comeback run here. But starting from the top of this game, where I thought St. John's was going to run away, they started the game with 3 early threes. I think it was one from either Dunlap, and then RJ Lewis hit one, and then Aaron Scott hit one. Right away, it was 9-0 or 9-2 when Baylor was in the 1-1-3 zone that we talked about last episode. And I mean, Baylor, they came right out of the zone. Scott Drew decided to abandon the zone after, we talked about this like scouting report wise. Like if you leave these guys open, like if you're trying to leave like RJ Lewis open or Aaron Scott open and they hit a 3 or 2, then you kind of just have to live with it. And apparently Scott Drew wasn't okay living with it. He kind of abandoned it and went man. And then St. John's proceeded to kind of shred their man defense in the first half as well. They were just kind of scattered all over the place throughout the first half. They got killed on the interior after they went to man. But yeah, and then they ended up coughing up the lead late with the turnovers, and credit Baylor for that. And then there were just tired legs throughout the overtimes, and it led to a lot of easy baskets. St. John's stayed hot throughout the game. I think they went 14 of 24 from 3. Baylor shot it pretty well as well, and they were able to break down some of the wing defenders for St. John's. So, which that was supposed to be their calling card, was guarding these guards or guarding anyone one-on-one, being like super versatile and basically being able to guard anyone on the floor. And they weren't really able to do that as their legs got more tired. And then obviously Zuby Ejiofor missing those free throws in double overtime was massive. And Roach and credit Norchad O'Meara for sticking with that rebound when RJ Lewis almost grabbed it to seal the game. Norchad grabs it, just puts the ball on the deck and gets it up to Roach. And obviously an unbelievable shot, but nobody's going to talk about how Norchad O'Meara making a play as the versatile big man that he is. And, that ultimately decided the game with that one big shot.
Yeah. On the Baylor side, a couple interesting things, right? I know Sunday we talked about Langston Love. I was I was surprised to see him back for this game. Right, I think he played 18 minutes, didn't really do much. Had a few rebounds, I think, but missed all his shot attempts. Played, you know, I expect that, right? St. John's a good team, good defensive team, especially, and so throwing him into the fire, not having played any of those tune-up games against higher quality opponents like Gonzaga or Arkansas, this is a tough one for him to walk right into his first game of the year against a defense like St. John's. But moving forward, Scott Drew has some interesting decisions to make, I think, because Rob Wright's looked really good. He's playing, I don't know, like tonight he played 27 minutes in a game that went to double overtime, right? Then obviously you have Roach, who's going to play. You have Nunn. You have Edgecombe, who's the 5-star. And then Langston Love coming back, right? They've got these guys that are all very talented. And so they're going to be some odd men out at times for sure. And Rob Wright's been pretty consistent. Edgecombe struggled to shoot the ball thus far. Like I think he's shooting sub 35%. He's had a few games where like tonight, I think he was 4 for 15. He's had a few games where he's really struggled from the floor. So it'll be interesting to see how Scott Drew handles that, right? Because he's got some young guys like Rob Wright, Edgecombe, who, if you go away from them, that can definitely deter some confidence in them. But at the same time, you kind of need to rock with the hot hand, especially when you're a team like Baylor, who's going to be competing in the Big 12 as one of the top teams and one of the better teams in the country. So you can't just say we're going to play development and expect these guys to improve. Like, you need to play to win, especially in these games against better teams. So I'll be interested to see how he manages this the rest of the season, especially if they're all healthy, because night to night, I think you could see guy like Rob Wright. I wouldn't be shocked if there are nights where he plays 15 minutes, but then there might also be nights where he plays 30 minutes, right? So that can definitely play with a player's confidence a little bit. So hopefully Scott Drew, he's a great coach. He's been doing it a long time, but hopefully he has a plan moving forward as to how he's going to manage these guys.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was surprised Love came back because there was a report just 3 days ago that said he had a setback and he probably wasn't going to play. And then I just happened to see him come off the bench and, he didn't produce really, but overall,
those college injury reports, right? Those college injury reports are so terrible, right?
Yeah, they can do whatever they want with those. Like, they're not required to send in a report like the professional leagues. So they're able to basically manipulate it however they want and kind of mess with the other team in that way. But I think it's a good problem to have with all these guards that Baylor has. They have 5 capable guards that they can go to. Obviously, Edgecombe's offensive game has been a little bit raw. He's not a jump shooter. He never really was a jump shooter, but he's been, I wouldn't say soft around the rim, but I think he's just trying to be a little bit too crafty instead of just trying to go over the top of guys. And he can poster basically anyone in the country. Like, he can jump over the top. He's got a 40-inch vert plus. So he just needs to be a little bit more mature in the lane as opposed to just flying in there and, trying to make a big time layup or something like that. But he needs to be able to be aggressive and go over the top. But yeah, and as for Rob Wright, he probably looks like their best playmaking guard right now, because that was kind of the issue, I guess, coming in with these guards, was who was going to be the point guard on this team, because Roach was never really classified as a true point guard. Nunn's obviously an off-ball guard, more the 3-and-D minded. But yeah, overall, Rob Wright looks like the guy who can, set the tone for this team. And although it's hard to trust a freshman to have him go out there and play 35 minutes a night, I think as the season goes on, he might have to be the guy.
Yeah, he looks the part. I feel like I'd trust him the most as their downhill creator, right? Because he can also get his own shot. He had 17 tonight, knocked down the 3. So I really like what I see from him. I was definitely surprised to see Scott Drew go back to Ojawuna in the second overtime. He hadn't played in a while. Came back to him. That's just a tough spot. It obviously ended up working out for them where they ended up winning the game, but it's a tough spot to ask a guy who's been sitting for a while to come back in that situation. And that game was moving quickly, right? Those guys were getting up and down, physical game. And so when you've been cold on the bench for a bit, it's a tough ask to bring a guy back in that only played 17 minutes over the course of 50.
Yeah, it was tough for him to be in the game in that situation too, just because, St. John's is playing fairly small with Scott at the 4. So they were just kind of getting spaced out that way. Like Norchad's not a natural 4-man. Like he's a natural, like offensive minded center. And I feel like they should have just completely tapped into their offense at that point. So it was a little bit surprising to see Ojonwuno on the floor for those minutes in OT.
Yeah. And then, St. John's on their side, if they shoot that well from 3, which I don't think they will, as we've alluded to in past episodes, like that's not their MO. Like that's going to be a struggle of theirs. But if they shoot the ball like that, they're going to be pretty hard to beat, right? They just happened to also play another team that was 15 for 29 from 3 tonight. But, they're not an offensive-minded team, right? The defense is what they're going to hang their hat on. But if they're able to produce like this offensively, like they're going to be a tough team to beat and can probably win the Big East.
Yeah, they might be a little bit better shooting the ball than like I guess we would give them credit for, because guys like Aaron Scott stepped up and he can hit these catch and shoot threes at least a 35% clip. Like it's really going to help this offense. Like RJ Lewis isn't going to hit. He went 3 for 5 tonight. He's not going to be a 60% shooter. He's closer to
what was the
20s.
comment? What was the comment you made that you could leave him in an open gym?
Yeah, you can leave him in an open gym. He's not going to shoot 60%. Like it's just a bit unlucky on Baylor's part, but I guess they still walked away with the win. But there were some positives and there were some negatives on both sides. Like Baylor, they have not figured out their defense. They thought the zone was going to be the answer. St. John's didn't even have to like get into the lane and like kick out off of that. They were able to just make one pass to the wing and then make a pass to the corner, and they got an open 3. They didn't even have to switch sides of the floor. They kept the ball on the same side, made 2 passes like 5 or 6 different times against the zone, and they got wide open corner 3s. Just like Baylor was just like completely living with them making shots. They didn't even make them work on the offense. So it was a bit frustrating to watch.
Yeah. Now another game earlier in the week on Monday, we had Gonzaga at San Diego State. From an offensive perspective, this game was not very pretty, not very efficient shooting. I think San Diego State was under 40% and Gonzaga was maybe just over 40%. I know they scored 80 points, but they got up around 30 free throws. So it wasn't very efficient from either side. But Graham Ike was really the story, right? He really controlled the game, finished with 23 and 9. And then Nembhard, of course, he's just that creator, experienced veteran guard, put up 19 and 10. So I know you had mentioned you thought Gonzaga could maybe have a little bit of a scare here, but they seem to handle business pretty consistently throughout.
Yeah, it was pretty comfortable overall. San Diego State got it to 6 or 7 with like 7 minutes left to go in this game. But I mean, this game was played how Dutcher wanted it played. Like he wanted to just allow these post up plays from Ike and cut off all the shooters. And he did that. Caleb Battle and Nolan Hickman only combined for 11 points, I believe. And they didn't really get that many shots off, especially from distance.
They were 0 for 5 from 3 and 3 for 13 combined from the floor.
Yeah, so I think Dutcher executed the game plan just fine on the defensive side. You know, they just didn't have enough offensive firepower. Obviously, you know, Ike went for 23 and 9, and like he missed like 10 minutes in the first half, and you know, he ended up dominating the game as the game went on. And Nemhard was great as well. And you know, he's a guy that, you know, people talk about him, but I don't think he gets enough credit for truly like how good of a playmaker he is and how good of like a creator for an offense he is. He's gotten so much better since his Creighton days when he was there for his first 2 years. He's just continued to get better every single year. And he finished this game with 19 and 10. So he was rock solid. In a game where they were like kind of trying to take away the perimeter guys, he still found a way to produce. So credit to him. And yeah, the difference obviously was in the front court. The Aztecs got nothing done with their front court production. They had their front court rotation of 4 guys finished with 13 points. You know, like I think Magoon Guath was held scoreless. He just wasn't a guy that you could really play in this game. He's too thin. He couldn't guard
He
Ike
had 0.
one-on-one.
He had 0 points. He did have 5 blocks, but he also had 5 fouls. He fouled out in 14 minutes.
He's super talented and super versatile, but he's not a guy to defend post-up actions. And, you know, he really struggled. And he dealt with like a little bit of an injury throughout that game as well. But, yeah, the front court just didn't have enough firepower. Jared Coleman-Jones didn't hit the perimeter shots that Gonzaga was giving him at times. So, but, you know, Nick Boyd and BJ Davis were solid. They were able to hit some perimeter shots for them. I think Boyd finished with like 23 and Davis got to like 15. So they kind of had to carry the offense, but you know, it's tough when the talent gap was as big as it was in this game. I actually think San Diego State did like a pretty good job to hang in there, albeit it was at Viejas and they expect to win every game that they play in that building. And also credit to Gonzaga for just, you know, they look like an elite tier team once again. Like they didn't necessarily look like an elite team last year, although like they came on strong towards the end of the season, made the Sweet 16, but they look like the Gonzaga of 3 to 4 years ago.
Yeah. I still have my reservations about this team. You know, especially against bigger teams, because like Ike is an undersized big, really. Like he plays bigger than he is, but he's only 6'9", and Ben Gregg is, you know, he hasn't really been great. He's coming off the bench now, I think, or he did the other night at least. So I still have my concerns with this team in certain matchups. They're going to be just fine in their conference, and they're going to beat most teams, but there are definitely going to be teams that give them fits just because matchups aren't good.
Yeah, and a guy who's been great is Michael Ajayi. He's been really good on the defensive end. He's kind of been the glue guy that they sort of thought they lost when they lost Anton Watson, but he's kind of filled in. He's not as good as Watson on the defensive side of the ball, but he brings a little bit more to the offense, and he can be like a floor spacer at the 4 position, and he can do a lot of work on the interior. He can guard post-ups a little bit, but he's bigger. He's bigger too,
Yeah.
and like, yeah. So I've been impressed with him so far. On both sides of the floor, he's been basically everything they've needed. And, you know, Ben Gregg coming off the bench is just, you know, the cherry on top, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, game on Tuesday night, Purdue went to Marquette. This score, as we talked about the other night, ended up at 18. Very misleading. This game was pretty close for about, I don't know, 32, 33 minutes. You know, it was fairly back and forth. Like Marquette had the lead for most of it, but it was a small lead. And then over the last like 6 or 7 minutes, Marquette just kind of like found a way to stretch it out. Ended up winning by 18. But this game, that score is not indicative really of what this game was.
Yeah, I mean, I would still say Marquette controlled the game. You know, they didn't really trail in this game for, I don't know if they trailed at all. Maybe early in the first half. But yeah, the final score wasn't indicative of how close the game really was. But I don't give Marquette enough credit, clearly. I've continued to go against this team. I called a Purdue win on the road, even in a spot where they're coming off a huge win against Alabama and had to go on the road and play Marquette. Marquette is always ready to go in any spot. Whenever they have to play a big team or a well-known team, they always step up. And what I didn't give them credit for enough is their defense. Although, I did have my concerns with their rim protection, but the way Shaka Smart plays, you don't really need a true rim protector. They try to deny the rim at all costs. And guys like Chase Ross and Stevie Mitchell are just unsung heroes, and they would fit in on any team in the country. They had a bunch of live ball turnovers that led to wide open layups, especially in the first half. It happened 3 or 4 times. And that was the difference in the first. Probably would have been a tie game if Purdue would have just been a little bit better with the ball and just not as careless. And that starts with Braden Smith. I think he only turned the ball over once or twice, but some of the shots that he was taking early on just were completely forced. They just didn't really make any sense. And it wasn't within the offense at all. They really struggled to play through Kaufman Wren in the first half. And that was because of, Smith was just getting a ball screen, waiting for the trap to go away, and then trying to make a play and taking a fadeaway in the mid-range. He did it 3 times, and he made one super tough shot. But overall, just shot for this team, and it came back to bite him in the first half. But in the second half, I was encouraged with how Purdue was on the offensive end. They were able to play through Kaufman Wren in the short roll a little bit more often. And he kind of controlled the first 10 minutes of the half. He was able to make some plays when Marquette sent help, and he was also able to do some work on the glass. And he just looked like the biggest interior force in the game. But ultimately, obviously, it wasn't enough because Cam Jones is the best guard in the country, and that's enough said. The guy had a triple double. He does everything that you need, and I don't know how this guy isn't in the NBA yet. And I don't know what GMs haven't or have seen from this guy to make them think that he can't fit in on an NBA roster. But he's been doing it his whole career. And now that he has a super high usage role, he's showing how good he truly is. And the man is an incredible guard in college basketball.
Yeah. Few notable things to me from this game was the fact that Marquette only turned it over 6 times, right? They really took care of the ball. They didn't shoot it very well from 3 anyway. I think they were somewhere around 30%.
Joplin's struggling.
He is really, really struggling. And I actually called a breakout game for him here. And while Marquette still got the win, he certainly wasn't the reason. He was okay, but he's struggling to make shots. He's 1 for 6 from 3 the other night, and I think he's somewhere around 20% on the year from 3. Nothing great. Ben Gold did hit a few the other night. He'd struggled a little bit earlier in the year. He was 3 for 6. Cam Jones was great, but I'm shocked he didn't make a 3. I don't know. There probably won't be another game this year where he doesn't make a 3. He was 0 for 3 from 3. But one of the things I talked about in my preview on Tuesday for this game was the Purdue needed some sort of production from one of those guards, whether it was going to be Harris, Cox, Colvin. They needed one of those guys to step up and make some shots like they had in some of their other big wins. On Friday, Cox had 3 threes in a row. He had 11 points against Bama. And in this game, they combined to go 0 for 11 and 0 for 7 from 3, right? Those 3 guys in a total of, they played 49 minutes between the 3. That's not going to win many games, right? They only scored 58 points here. And, if you looked at their shooting stats, they were 20 for 50 from the floor, 6 for 18 from 3. Just not good enough to go on the road and win a basketball game, especially when you turn it over 15 times. So credit to Marquette. They've been good. Couple nice wins here now, and now they got another game, another test against a weaker SEC team, but it will test some things that haven't really been tested yet against Georgia on Saturday. They have kind of an interior presence that, I'm not sure how Marquette will handle it. Now, I still expect them to be fine in this game, but that could definitely be an interesting battle for them.
Yeah, I mean, they might force 25 turnovers against Georgia's backcourt. Like, those guys don't really take care of the ball that well.
And
yeah, and Demery and those guys. I don't think they're going to take care of the ball that well, but they can have a ton of success on the glass in that game. Yeah. But one thing I did see from Marquette was their ability to shut down those perimeter players was, I think, more of a factor than Purdue just missing shots, because those shots weren't wide open. I thought Marquette did a great job of closing out hard and then forcing those guys to beat them in the lane, and they just weren't really willing to do that. So I would credit Marquette's defense a lot more than, Purdue's guards kind of going into like ghost mode. And, I don't think Fletcher Loyer wasn't really all that great in this game either. It was basically just Smith and Kaufman-Renn trying to work and pick and roll. And, they eventually figured it out early in the second half, but I don't think they played through Kaufman-Renn enough in the post-up game and then trying to force a double team and letting him use his passing ability out of that to generate those open looks and really force this Marquette defense to work more in rotation. And they didn't really have to do that all that much.
Yeah, I haven't been very impressed with Fletcher Loyer. I felt like he's kind of struggled to start this season. And if they're going to be successful, I know we were really praising them on Sunday night after their win on Friday. And, they're still a really good team. 6th in the country was probably a bit high. So this loss probably deserved, and we'll knock them down a few. But with that being said, they're not going to be the team that they have aspirations to be if he's not better.
Yeah, no, and the defense needs to get cleaned up too. Like they still need to find their ideal front court rotation, because Caleb First didn't look good the other night. He was like, he's bigger than anybody on Marquette's front line, and he just struggled to finish at the rim when he was able to get those passes, and he was standing at the dunker spot, and he's getting blocked by guys like Chase Ross. He did it multiple times. And obviously, like, you got to credit those guards for never giving up on any play. Any other team that, sees a wide open layup opportunity for the other team is basically just giving up there. Marquette's flying to the ball and always trying to make a play. And, Shaka has just built that culture there, and, just credit them for how much energy that they play with every single night.
Yeah, without a doubt. Now, the final game, which was last night, we're going to talk about, is Illinois and Alabama. Alabama, this was a neutral site game, but it was really a home game. It was in Birmingham. So much more of a home game for Alabama than it is for Illinois. Alabama needed to get this one. They needed to get right. Probably the most unbelievable thing to me in this game is Mark Sears playing 21 minutes going scoreless. But, this really showed to me what a true leader he was. He subbed himself out of the game because there were other guys that were playing better than him. Not many SEC player of the year or any player of the year in any league is going to do that in a game against the top 25 opponent. Now, some people may look at it as like, oh, he's just tapping out, like it's kind of a soft move. But if you watched this game, you saw how good Philon and Holloway were playing. Holloway, this was really encouraging for Alabama to see him play this well, right? He had 18 points, 7 of 10 shooting off the bench in 29 minutes, right? So he played 8 more minutes than Sears. And Sears really put up a dud all the way around, right? 0 points, 2 turnovers, 2 assists, and only 1 rebound, right? He was just kind of running around out there, 0 for 5 from the field, didn't really do much. But Philon, Grant Nelson was awesome. Wrightsell was pretty good, efficient, and Holloway, of course, as I already said. So this was a big win for Alabama. Now, Illinois, I'm not as high on. I don't necessarily think they're a ranked team, at least not right now. They have some deficiencies, but this was a game that Alabama needed to get.
Yeah, and we were just talking about basically counting out Aiden Holloway, and then he goes out and looks unbelievable, puts up 18. And then, I mean, it was the Grant Nelson show to start this game. He started off with 3 straight threes. Brad Underwood was looking to leave him open and force him to just take these open threes that he's taken all year and hasn't necessarily knocked him down. It just really opened up the rest of these guys. It opened up a ton of driving lanes, albeit Illinois' defense was not good. Even if Nelson wouldn't have hit those shots, I don't think it would have gone much differently. But yeah, I mean, Phylon looked like the best player on the floor, and it wasn't necessarily that close. I mean, he's been everything that NATO's wanted. He's taken the playmaking duties off of Mark Sears, who's like, that's not really his nature. He's more of a scoring guard. But Phylon stepping in and doing that is big time for this team. And yeah, obviously, it is hard to say that Illinois' defense is bad after playing an offense that we can classify as a top 10 to 15 offense in the country. But they had a lot of issues in this game. And, it started with the point of attack defense. Grant Nelson opened up the game for them when he hit those 3 threes in a row. But they just looked a bit soft overall, trying to defend. There was no physicality. I hate to call a team soft because I don't know what the inner workings of a team looks like. I don't know what they look like in practice. I don't know how hard they play or if they're going out there and playing 100% every night. But they just didn't look like they wanted to play with a ton of physicality on the perimeter outside of Kylan Boswell, who always does. Guys like Yakachonis, Will Riley's never going to be a great defender, I don't think. I just don't think he's super great laterally, and he's not very strong. So he just struggles to guard like almost any type of wing player or any guard. But, wasn't great on the defensive side of the ball either. They allowed the Alabama guards to get in the lane and get kick out threes or get lobs for Amori or Jaron Stevenson. And then like Thomas Lavavicic needs to be a better rim protector than he's been. They want to filter everything into him by playing their super deep drop coverage that Alabama also likes to play. But he didn't look super comfortable against a great offense. So that's something to monitor in the future as well. And then for Illinois on the offensive side, Yakachonis is super talented. Like, don't get me wrong, but he's so careless with the basketball, and he's always trying to make not like a fancy pass, but he's always he's trying to look off defenders. Like there's kind of some like Braden Smith characteristics in there by always trying to make like a more of a clever or like, yeah, obviously like trying to look a guy off and make a perfect pass. And he's a little bit loose with the ball in general as well. He had 6 turnovers, and I think he's averaging close to like 4.5 or 5 this year. That's going to be a big problem for a team that really values taking care of the basketball, and they don't really do a ton of work on the offensive glass. So they're going to need to take care of the ball better. And yeah, so that's just some stuff they need to clean up. They're young, and I do think they'll obviously get a little bit better as the season goes on, but it's going to be tough for them if they want to contend in the Big Ten.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. On the Alabama side, I'm really struggling. Like, I don't know what they're going to do with Cliff Amorie. He's only playing like 15 minutes a game. He's been a hack. He's really struggling in what they're trying to do. When I thought he was going to be one of the better transfers of the offseason and really make this Alabama defense elite because of his ability to protect the rim. And I know we touched on it last episode that really hasn't been the case, and he hasn't been able to play a ton of minutes. He's been in foul trouble. So I don't know what to make of him. It feels maybe like a fit thing. He really fit in well at Rutgers and in the Big Ten. I feel like he's probably more of a Big Ten player. But I guess we'll see. I mean, I know we're not in conference play yet. And I know Alabama's only played, 5 games. So it's still very early and a small sample size. relatively anyway. So, I expect him to play better, but they can't be getting 4 fouls out of him and 0 blocks. He had 0 block shots the other night. That's kind of what they need out of him.
Ideally, like, it should work, right? I mean, Nate Oates is always going to play drop coverage, and he's really their only elite big that can play in that style, but he needs to stay on the floor. Like, if he can't stay on the floor, the Alabama defense goes back to where it was last year, unless like Aiden Sherrill can step up and be that guy, which he actually got some run and looked okay. But he just needs, I think if he could just stay out of foul trouble, I think he's going to be completely fine. But he doesn't look the same as he looked at Rutgers. Everyone made him out to be this like elite athlete, really. And he really just hasn't shown that high level shot blocking ability, like above the rim. And he's just being a little bit too physical, I guess. Like in post ups, he doesn't need to like have an arm bar on the guy in the post. He can just play straight up. Like he's physically strong enough to where he can just play straight up and be fine. He doesn't need to block a million shots a night either. He just needs to stay solid. And he just hasn't done that so far. It's just
like his size and length alone is going to disrupt shots, right? He's going to get his blocked shots, but like he doesn't need to be so physical to be a force for them, right? Like I said, his length and size alone, if he just stands there and he's solid, like that's going to disrupt and change what a shot looks like from the opponent.
Yeah, just look at like what Ryan Kalkbrenner does. Obviously, he's taller. He's 7'2", but he stays vertical better than any big in the country, and honestly, any big that I've ever seen. Like Kalkbrenner's never fouled out of a game in his career, and he's been there. This is his 5th year there. So he just needs to take a page out of his book and just play a little bit more straight up and just be more vertical all the time. Like it shouldn't really be that hard for a guy that's as old and experienced as he is. He has 4 years at a Big Ten school where he's had to contend with elite bigs his entire career. You'd figure he'd be a little bit better, but maybe it's the fast pace that Alabama's playing with that he's struggling to keep up with. Because Rutgers played at a snail's pace for 4 years. Maybe he's struggling to get up and down the floor a little bit. I don't know. Because before this, even when he wasn't in like huge foul trouble, he wasn't on the floor all that long. Like he hasn't gotten to 30 minutes yet when he could absolutely do that at Rutgers. So it could be maybe a conditioning thing. I don't really know.
Yeah. I guess we'll see kind of as the season wears on what they end up doing. And if he stays out of foul trouble and when he does, how his minutes change versus some of these games where he's picking up 4 or 5 fouls in 15 minutes or so. Now, quickly, before we jump to previewing this weekend's games, which there aren't really that many, at least good ones, we're going to talk about a few players or teams that, we want to give some flowers for this week. The first one for me, anyway, I already kind of touched on him, is Aiden Holloway. He, as we talked about last weekend, he's really struggled. And I was starting to wonder whether he could really be even a shell of the 5-star guy that he was supposed to be, or that he was, right? That Auburn recruited last year. And last night he showed it. He had, as I said, 18 points, couple assists, didn't turn the ball over in 29 minutes. If he can play like that, then Alabama's ceiling is very high, especially once Chris Youngblood's back. Like this, the offensive ceiling is through the moon, as we already had expected them to be an elite offense. If he can be this for them off the bench, especially when Sears doesn't really have it going on certain nights and he can step in and be a guy, this would be massive. Now I'm going to pump the brakes because I'm not expecting this. He had a good game, which I think is very encouraging, but until I see more consistent performances from him. I'm not gonna jump to say like, oh, Aiden Holloway has arrived, but definitely excited for him if he can continue to play like this, and hopefully that built some confidence for him moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'll pump the brakes a little bit on Aiden Holloway. I think they were more just kind of riding the hot hand there with Holloway, and Steers saying, "Hey, he's having a good night. Like, just let me sit on the bench and watch him cook a little bit," and he did. So give him credit for stepping up, coming off a few bad games, and really sealing this game for them with his ability down the stretch.
And good for him for staying ready, right? I know it's probably easy for him as a guy who came into college as a 5-star expecting to play a lot, and didn't do a ton last year, comes over to Bama, hasn't really played a ton coming off the bench. It's probably pretty easy for him to get discouraged. His confidence might be low because he hasn't really lived up to that hype yet, and he's not the guy that he probably thought he was going to be, and he's not in the NBA as a 5-star yet. But here he was. He stayed ready and had a big game. So credit to him. I know I'm sure it's tough on him mentally sometimes.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, he's a small guard. He needs to shoot it really well to make his mark on this game. And hey, hopefully he turns it around, because he seems like a really good player, and hopefully he can shoot it a little bit better as the season goes on.
Yeah. Now the other thing I just wanted to touch on briefly before I let you get into your spiel, I'm going to give Villanova some credit. I'm going to give them some credit. I said on Sunday that I wouldn't be surprised if they lost to Penn, just because I was just so out on them. And boy, I couldn't have been more wrong. They shot 18 of 30 from three. They beat Penn 93-49. So I'll give them some credit today, but you best believe on Sunday night after they get beat down by Maryland that I'll be right back on the same train I was on Sunday. So they can have their time for the next couple days.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle Neptune got over the hump and won a Big 5 game finally. I think a lot of that was more on Penn being very bad. Like they do not look good. They got thrashed by St. Joe's, last week at some point. So
yeah,
they're not great, but hey, Villanova, they're still fighting. They're still there. They still have a pulse. It might not be for long. They got to play Maryland, so we'll see.
3-3, right?
They're 3-3. Yeah,
they're already playing Game 7 on Sunday. Crazy.
Yeah, they get Maryland on a neutral floor, so a lot of things can happen on a neutral floor, as we've seen. With the whole first day of these MTEs, like the underdogs are just on fire right now. It seems like the underdogs winning every single game. So, yeah, Villanova, hey, they have a chance in that game, I think.
A chance.
Yeah.
We'll see. Now, a couple players for you I know you wanted to mention.
Yeah, first guy, I'm a Mountain West guy, so I'll shout out a guy from Utah State, Ian Martinez. They have a big game tomorrow against Iowa. He's been unbelievable. He's averaging 22.8 points a game right now through 3. He's thriving, or through 4 games, sorry. And he's thriving in Jared Calhoun's open system. They have a ton of weapons there. And Ian Martinez is kind of the perfect 3-level scorer for this team. And yeah, he's just been fantastic so far. And he should be able to cut through that Iowa perimeter defense like butter. So that wouldn't surprise me at all. And then another guy. He's come
a long way since his days at Maryland.
He really has. He didn't have this kind of offensive game.
No. He barely scored at Maryland. Like he was like, it was painful, I felt like, to watch him on the offensive end.
It was. Yeah, the jump shot's still like a little bit, it looks a little awkward, but the efficiency is kind of there. We shot 38% from 3 last year, 40% the year before. So I mean, he's contributing now, and he's one of the best players in the Mountain West, and nobody's really talking about him all that much. And another guy I wanted to talk about, Jalan Lowe at Pittsburgh, putting up a triple double. Went for 11, 10, and 10. I believe it was against VMI. So, and they won like 93-46 or something like that. But credit him for going for a triple double. It doesn't happen all that often in college basketball. Unless you're Cam Jones, we'll probably see like 3 more from him because he's just the greatest player of all time. And then a team I wanted to give some props to was Drake in their upset win over Miami early today. They controlled the game. Like they completely dominated Miami. They dominated them on the glass. They kept them out of transition. And that team, Ben McCollum was a D2 coach at Northwest Missouri State. I'm not sure how long he was there, but he brought 4 players that are now in his starting lineup at Drake. And they've looked like they've fit into D1 basketball just seamlessly. And, you know, they're undefeated right now, a wire-to-wire win over Miami. And, yeah, they completely dominated them. Miami looked lost on the offensive end. And, yeah, Drake had a great game plan. So just kind of wanted to give them some credit.
Yeah. I'm going to shout out someone who frequently listens to the pod. Not going to say who this is, but we were talking about, well, he knows who he is. But we were talking about yesterday the ACC and kind of where we saw teams and who might be able to win the ACC. And I said, you know, Miami, they're kind of in that second tier. And he said, you know, I think they're a bit closer to Florida State. And that quote at 3:06 p.m. yesterday, they need to watch out for Drake tomorrow. And he was very right. You know, good for him. Good for him. I'll give him some props there.
Not really sure where he saw that coming from, but hey, props to him for that.
Just an anti-Miami guy. If that helps out any of our listeners to determine who that is.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, FSU might be on the rise too. You know, they're actually playing a lot better basketball than I gave them credit for. The defense looks pretty good. So if you're listening, I'll give FSU some credit. I'm not going to put them up in tier 1 or tier 2, but hey, they look pretty good. I actually had some money on Hofstra against them, and I lost. So hey, I'll give FSU credit now.
Yeah. He'll appreciate this. Now moving ahead to the weekend games, don't have much on the agenda for games. The big one is tomorrow night. Again, another big Friday night game. We have Duke and Arizona, a top 20 matchup, both coming off losses against their first like true test, right? Duke lost to Kentucky. What was now, I guess, 9-10 days ago tomorrow. And Arizona hasn't played in a week. Their last game was last Friday night against Wisconsin. In that game, they gave up over 100 points, right? So Tommy Lloyd has probably had these guys, you know, prepared all week for this Duke game. They probably watched that Kentucky Duke film 100 times. And they're going to be ready to go. I fully expect Arizona to be ready to rock and roll. But the same goes for Duke, right? They didn't play well in their first real test. Then they played Wofford, I think, last weekend and really waxed them. Was never really much of a game. I think it was 51-14 at halftime or something. So the good days of Wofford basketball appear to be behind them. But you know, John Shire's also probably had a big week of practice with these guys, getting them ready for this game tomorrow night. So this is going to be the main event, right? Unfortunately, it's a late tip, right? I think it's a 10:30 tip, Eastern time anyway. So gonna be a tough one, but you know, definitely looking forward to watching this game if I can stay awake for it.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm probably not going to fall asleep after the Duke Arizona game because you know you got North Carolina visiting Hawaii. If you're a real sicko, you can stay up till 2:30 and watch that entire game if it's close. But
the Rainbow Warriors, let's go! They just got some new jerseys, I think.
They did. They look pretty nice actually. But yeah, hey, Carolina's going to come ready too. But yeah, in this game, Arizona's going to shore up the defense, obviously. I think this kind of suits Duke fairly well, being able to play in an up-tempo game for basically the entire game. When Kentucky was able to slow Duke down, they had a ton of success in that game. Obviously Duke didn't make open shots in that game, and I thought they played pretty well in the Champions Classic for the most part, until like the 12-minute mark. Second half, things started to get mucked up a bit for them. But I think in this more open style, I think they're going to thrive. And I think don't love Proctor and Foster. I think the guard group of Duke is better than the guard group of Arizona. I think Caleb Love is, he needs to play super well if they want to run away with this game. And obviously the home atmosphere is going to help a ton. But the energy is always going to be there behind your home environment in the big game like this. But I can see Duke walking away with a win here. I keep going with these road teams against home teams at a hype spot, and I keep getting burnt. So I'm not gonna say Duke's gonna go in there and roll or even win this game. I think it's going to be super tight and all the way through, and I think it's going to be a pretty high scoring game that probably gets to like 80 possessions on each side, which is super high. But yeah, and another guy, Maluach needs to stay out of foul trouble in this game too, or else Tobe Awaka is going to get all over the glass against Duke, because they drop down to Malik Brown, who's not known as a defensive rebounder at all. He's more of an offensive rebounder and more versatile rim protector kind of guy, but he's not a super big guy. And so I think Tobe Awaka can have a big day on the offensive glass. But overall, I'm more excited to watch this game than anything and see if both of these teams can bounce back off of their poor performance in their first true test of the year.
Yeah, I don't really know what to make of this game, right? Because both teams didn't look very good in their first real test. So both are going to be hungry for a victory, right? And like you said, Arizona's got the home atmosphere behind them. I actually saw when I looked this game up, they're going white out tomorrow. So should be a fun atmosphere there at Arizona. But I'm very back and forth on this game, because I do think Duke is the more talented team. But I worry about their half court offense. I worry about some other things. The guard play is iffy. Can Maluach stay out of foul trouble? Can Duke solve their cramping issue in big game? I don't know. So we'll see. Arizona's got to play better, right? They lost, giving up 103 points to Wisconsin, right? Who we'll talk about Wisconsin a little bit more here in a second. But if they're that bad defensively against a Duke team, they're going to get run out of their own gym. Part of me thinks that Duke's going to lose again. I think it's going to be a tight game. I think it's going to be, like you said, high scoring. But I think Caleb Love flashes back to his North Carolina days and hits some big shots against rival Duke, and puts Arizona over the top, handing Duke their second loss in the last 10 days.
Yeah, I mean, actually, you know what? I'm going to take Duke. I'm going to take Duke on the road here. I'll back another road team. I think they're going to thrive in this fast-paced action, and I think the perimeter group of Duke may outclass the perimeter group of Arizona, because Arizona has no depth at the guard spot. If Love has one of his on days, obviously Arizona is going to win this game behind the home crowd. But if any of those guards get into foul trouble, they have to go to guys like Anthony Delorso and Conrad Martinez, who I don't see them being super productive in a big game like this, although it's easier for them to do that at home. I'm going to say Duke thrives in the fast pace, better defense, and I think they're going to hit more shots than they did against Kentucky.
I worry about Duke's transition defense a little bit. Like we talked about it after that Kentucky game, especially in this fast-paced game. Like it's not so much that I don't think Duke's capable, but there's like some miscommunication, guys not getting back against Kentucky at times, even after a basket. So I think Arizona's definitely watched that on film, and they're going to make a point to try and push the pace in this game and get up and down the floor, because the more half court possessions you're going to play against this Duke defense, the worse off you're going to be, right? Duke's too elite defensively, with Flag and Maluak at the rim, and Proctor, who's a very good defender. So the more half court possessions you're forced to play against that Duke defense, the worse off you're going to be. So I would guess that Tommy Lloyd is like, let's get the ball out, make or miss, and let's go, right? They're trying to get to the rim, trying to get some of these guys in foul trouble and really play behind that home crowd.
Yeah, definitely. And I think obviously, hopefully Shire emphasized maybe the lack of effort getting back on defense with this young group. And, maybe it's just a communication issue or even a technique issue on how to play transition defense. But I would assume that they probably clean some of that stuff up, although they're still young. And, if they get hit with a big 10-12-0 spurt on the road, like how are they going to respond? And, as a younger group, I guess it probably wouldn't be as good. But, Flag for a 17-year-old, or I don't know if he's 18 yet, but he plays well beyond his years, obviously. Yeah. But, the offensive game needs to mature a little bit. But I think everywhere else, I think it's a pretty mature game outside of, sometimes he closes out and he tries to fly at you and make a big play, as we talked about. And the guys are able to just get to the rim and make a play easier just because Flag's trying to make a big time play. But overall, I do think his game is like pretty mature.
Yeah, no, for sure. So that's really the game of the weekend. Now tomorrow night has the potential for another big game. We have Baylor, who, as we talked about at the top of the show, had that big win tonight in double overtime. And they are going to be playing the winner of Tennessee and Virginia, right? And most would expect that to be Tennessee. I'm not sure where that game stands right now.
It's a close, low-scoring game right now. As we record, it's 22-21. Just started the second half.
Yeah, so probably going to be Tennessee if I had to put my money on it. Not a Virginia guy whatsoever, if you've been able to tell from any of the first 7 episodes. Pretty common theme. Don't like Virginia, don't like Villanova. Common theme between those two teams. Not much offense. Pretty ugly basketball. So, but Tennessee Baylor, if that's the game we get, this is going to be, I think, a pretty fun game to watch.
For sure. I would probably take Tennessee just because I think they're far more physical and they can do a ton of work on the offensive glass. But a place to monitor is, Baylor being able to force some turnovers against this team as they did against St. John's. Zakai Ziegler hasn't been great with the ball, with more on-ball usage this year. And the other guards I don't really trust to handle the ball at a super high level. So that would be Baylor's avenue to success on the defensive end. But if Tennessee is able to get clean, open looks from 3, they're far better shooters than St. John's. So I wouldn't be surprised if they gave up another 50% from 3 kind of day, like led by Chaz Lanier, who's an elite movement shooter. Like, I don't think Baylor's going to be able to play zone here because Tennessee will kill them on the glass. They might kill them on the glass anyway, but they would leave too many shooters open. So overall, I don't like Baylor hasn't cleaned up their defense, and Tennessee is always elite on the defensive end with their elite physicality. So I would take Tennessee to win that game if they end up holding on against Virginia.
Yeah, I would take Tennessee as well. I think the offensive glass is just going to be too big of a factor in that game. And Baylor, you mentioned the tired legs tonight down the stretch of their double overtime game, right? They got to turn around and play tomorrow again. That's not something that they're accustomed to yet, right? This isn't, rarely do you have to play back-to-back days, right? Other than in these early season tournaments. So they're going to have to turn around and play another elite team in Tennessee, a team that's better than St. John's. So this is going to be a tough one for them, especially if Tennessee is able to get the job done in regulation, right? I think that the minutes that Baylor had to play tonight while they are deep at guard, right? Like Langston Love's not quite healthy, clearly. So I think Tennessee would win this game just because it's just, kind of a letdown spot for Baylor, plus the interior defensive rebounding is just not there. They're going to be riding high after that win tonight. So definitely could see them come out tomorrow and just kind of lay flat and Tennessee just be physical and dominate them on the glass and inside.
Yeah, and I think Tennessee will do a better job of limiting like guys like Rob Wright, Roach, and Edgecombe from getting downhill. And they have more elite rim protectors than St. John's has. St. John's, their defenders are just open up their hips a little bit too early. Tennessee's not going to do that. They're going to body you up and they're going to keep you away from the rim. And then when you get to the rim, they have elite rim protectors there. So I could a long night for Baylor, although they could shoot their way to a win as well.
Yeah, they could. Because that's the flip side, right? Like they might also be riding high and continue that hot play and score a bunch of points and make 15 more threes and win. So if that's the matchup we get, definitely looking forward to that one. Now the final game, just wanted to briefly mention, is Wisconsin, right? They play against UCF tomorrow night. UCF's undefeated still, if I'm not mistaken. And Wisconsin almost lost on, Monday or Tuesday night. They played UT Rio Grande Valley, right? They won by 3 points, 87-84, and almost gave up a game tying three at the buzzer. They were probably riding a little too high after their victory by 15 points against Arizona on Friday night. So we'll see here. They're 5-point favorites against UCF. UCF, as I said, undefeated. So this is a game I'll have my eye on. I probably won't be as locked into it as I will some other games, but definitely one to monitor.
Yeah, I mean, Wisconsin was definitely in a letdown spot on whenever they played Monday or Tuesday. But Rio Grande Valley's been pretty feisty overall. They gave Creighton a game on opening night, although Kalkbrenner went for 49 that night. They're able to they played Crowell and Winter off the floor late in the game with their 5-guard set. So it kind of gave Wisconsin issues. So it was a little bit more of the matchup than I think it was more of a letdown spot. But for Wisconsin, yeah, they're just going to have to keep rolling. Both teams are going to have to keep rolling here. I'm going to have my eye on UCF's defense a little bit here. Johnny Dawkins teams are typically predicated off of their rim protection and their length and their versatility on the wings. And they don't really have as much of that as they did last year. Although I still think it's solid, but I'm going to have my eye on that defense and see how they operate. And then to see if these Wisconsin guards can continue to roll, John Tonje and John Blackwell, to see if they really are the real deal and to see if they can be elite Big Ten guards.
Yeah. I'm probably going to side with UCF not quite being a basketball school yet. And I'm going to take Wisconsin to win this game. I think they get back on, not that they lost against Rio Grande Valley, but I think they get back on track in the sense that they play a little bit better and hand UCF their first loss.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't be surprised at either outcome here. I'll take Wisconsin just because, I have my reserves about the UCF defense right now. UCF has firepower on the wing or at the guard spot, but I'll just back the team, that I think is more well-rounded and more experienced in Wisconsin.
Yeah. So like we said, not a great weekend of games, a few good ones, a few like decent games, as we said, Maryland and Villanova, Georgia, Marquette, couple decent ones, but nothing too crazy. But definitely keep your eye on that Arizona Duke game. That's going to be one of the better games that we see over, of the week. So with that, looking forward to the next episode on Sunday, breaking down some of these games. And then that'll probably be one of our bigger episodes on Sunday as we dive into some of the holiday week tournaments, right? The Maui Invitational next week, with some big games like that Iowa State Auburn game to kick that off. So looking forward to the next episode. And some of those games coming up next week. It's typically one of my favorite weeks of the season aside from March Madness. So hope you guys enjoyed the show, and we'll talk to you next time.